There are 5 police cars parked in front of the house. What on earth happened? One morning, as I woke up in a hotel during a business trip in Europe, a frantic text message from my younger sister lit up my phone. The string of exclamation marks dancing on the screen vividly conveyed her panic. And it was no wonder. Those police cars were there because I had called them, with a cold, glass-like anger. The story begins about a week before that message arrived. My name is Kristen. I'm 35. I work at an international consulting firm, spending half of every month flying between overseas client sites. I juggle multiple large-scale projects that could determine the future of entire corporations, sometimes working around the clock on analysis and strategy. It's a career I built by sacrificing sleep and personal life. Tough as the work is, it brings a matching income and the satisfaction of feeling the dynamism of the global economy firsthand. The suburban house I bought a few years ago was the crowning proof of my efforts. And my only sanctuary. High ceilings, wide sunlit windows, and interiors unified with minimal yet warm materials. Every detail was a piece of the fortress I had built with my own strength, untouchable by anyone. For someone like me, constantly adrift in sterile hotels around the world, this home, filled with wood's warmth and art I loved, was the one place that restored me to simply being Kristen. I have a younger sister, 3 years my junior. Since childhood, we were like oil and water. She was expressive, saying without hesitation what she wanted, while I pressed my emotions inward and always held myself back. Her impulsiveness disrupted my plans, and my logical streak clashed with her sensibilities. It wasn't just a difference in personality. It was a fundamental dissonance. When she married her longtime boyfriend early, her husband and in-laws entered the picture, and our relationship grew even more distant. Holiday dinners at Thanksgiving or Christmas, when we were obligated to meet, were always laced with the tension of walking on thin ice. We exchanged harmless small talk and took great care not to cross into each other's territory. That was the best solution for us sisters, at least until that day. That day, I had just finished a weeks-long financial restructuring project in Europe's banking sector and returned home 2 days earlier than planned. After nights of negotiations, the relief of finally securing final client approval was overwhelming. I couldn't wait another moment. I had to return to my quiet sanctuary. The flight went smoothly, and by early afternoon, I was standing once again before my familiar home. The small path lined with seasonal flowers, the chic front door. I pictured myself sinking deep into my favorite sofa, catching up on the streaming shows I'd missed. Holding that small, yet for me now, supreme bit of happiness in my chest, I slid the key into the lock. But the moment I opened the door, all my plans shattered to pieces. Someone was inside my house. More than one person. The air was wrong. A strange odor, half the smell of unfamiliar daily life, half construction dust, hit my nose. From the crack of the living room door came unfamiliar men's rough voices, the high-pitched whine of drills cutting into walls, and the dull thud of hammering. Burglars? No, something didn't fit. Strange work boots and sneakers were scattered carelessly across the polished entryway tiles. Among them, I spotted the gaudy neon designer sneakers my sister had flaunted on social media. My chest thudded with a heavy, icy foreboding. Silently, I crept down the hallway, heels muffled, and placed my hand gently on the living room doorknob. Then, bracing myself, I threw it open. "What exactly are you doing here?" My voice came out lower and calmer than even I expected. What spread before me was my house, and yet not my house. At the far end of the living room stood the open kitchen I had carefully chosen after visiting exhibitions in Italy. The beautiful tiled wall was ripped down, pipes dangling like exposed guts. The master bath and toilets were the same, several workers swinging hammers as if it were a demolition site, tearing into the plumbing. Concrete shards and wallpaper scraps littered the floor. Tools were scattered across my custom-designed kitchen counter, stained with oil and dust. And at the center of this chaos, arms crossed and presiding like a queen, stood my sister. Next to her was her husband, smiling benignly, though with no trace of initiative. A little farther off, her in-laws lounged deep in my beloved sofa, sipping tea as if this were their own home. My sudden return froze everyone in place. The drill stopped, silence fell, as though time itself had halted. But the first to break it was my sister's voice, bright, lilting, utterly devoid of guilt. "Oh, Kristen, you're back so soon. Surprise. Look, it's amazing, right? While you were away, we thought we'd redo all the bathrooms and kitchen for you. Since we'll be moving in here, the old fixtures wouldn't be practical, don't you think? You have good taste, but for family living, things should be a little more functional, right? I couldn't understand her words right away. Move in? Renovation? I recognized every individual word, yet strung together, they slipped past me as though they were in a foreign language. Was it the jet lag from the long flight? For a few seconds, I just stared blankly at the reality unfolding before me. Exposed pipes, rubble scattered across the floor, and worst of all, my own relatives destroying my property while behaving as though they owned the place. Anger began to rise from deep within me, like magma from the earth's core, and strangely, I felt it with icy clarity. Kristen, don't just stand there. Come sit down. You must be tired from your trip, came a voice from the sofa. It was my sister's father-in-law speaking with the calm authority of someone who believed himself the master of this house. That single sentence cleared my confusion in an instant. A thought struck me. I had unlocked the front door myself. There were no scratches, no sign of forced entry. So how had these people gotten inside? I had never given anyone an emergency spare key. Before that, let me ask you something. I ignored the father-in-law's invitation and fixed my gaze on my sister, who stood at the center of the room. How did you get into this house? I never gave anyone a spare key, and the door wasn't damaged. For a moment, she faltered. Then, with a smug smile, she declared as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Oh, the key? At Christmas, when we visited, I borrowed your key case for a minute and made a copy. Since you're always on long business trips and we never know when you'll be back, of course family should have a spare key. Did I really need to ask permission? Of course. The words tolled like a warning bell in my mind. This had been planned. It wasn't some impulsive act. It was a deliberate, carefully prepared invasion of my sanctuary, timed for my absence. That realization hardened my anger into a glacial resolve. I turned first to the workers, who were glancing at me uneasily. They weren't at fault. They were probably victims too. Excuse me, but who exactly hired you for this job? My voice was level, stripped of emotion, the tone of business. The man in the helmet, seemingly the foreman, shifted uncomfortably and gestured toward my sister. This lady here. She explained that the homeowner, her sister, was away on long business trips, so she was commissioning the renovation on her behalf. I nodded slowly, then spoke with sharp finality. I see. Thank you. But the owner of this house is me, Kristen. I never authorized any renovation. Whatever contract you were given, I'm instructing you, as the legal owner, to stop all work immediately and leave this property. Consider this a formal order. You'll receive your day's wages and compensation for the inconvenience later. My commanding tone left no room for argument. The workers exchanged glances, then sheepishly switched off their power tools. Hey, what are you saying, Kristen? I told them it was fine, so it's fine, my sister screeched. I no longer bothered to answer her personal whining. My gaze shifted coldly to the four of them together. The intruders. And as for you guys, this is not your house. It's mine. Why are you here? Why are you destroying my home without my permission? Someone explain it to me in words I can actually understand. Why are you so worked up? We're family. Cut us some slack. The one who spoke up again was the father-in-law. Family. He spoke that word, as if it were his right, despite having no blood relation to me, despite having met me only a handful of times. If those words had come from my real father, perhaps I would have listened for a moment. I might have felt sadness or disappointment, but not this instant visceral rejection. But this man was a complete stranger. Just because he happened to be my sister's in-laws didn't give him the right to stomp into my sanctuary and wield the word family like a weapon. The absurdity, the sheer arrogance, pushed my anger past its boiling point. I fixed my eyes on him and with a calm yet razor-sharp voice said clearly, "Family, please, let's not joke. With all due respect, you're nothing but a stranger to me. And yet here you are in my house lecturing me? I find that incomprehensible." At my words, the father-in-law's face flushed a deep, angry red. He looked utterly disbelieving of my reaction, and with a trembling voice, he went on. My son's family are struggling financially. They said they couldn't even pay rent for their apartment. You're always gone on business trips, and this house is so big, so many empty rooms. So I arranged for them to move in. The plumbing was old, so we even started renovations out of kindness. Isn't helping each other what family does? You should be grateful, not angry. Grateful. The moment that word hit my ears, the last thread of restraint inside me snapped. Grateful? You made a spare key, came into my house without permission, and started destroying my property? And you expect me to be grateful? Your sense of what's normal is completely different from mine. This is not kindness or helping. This is outright trespassing and malicious property damage. Get out within 1 minute, or I'll call the police. I took my phone from my handbag and showed them the emergency number, 911, on the screen. That concrete action changed their faces instantly. The arrogance that had been there moments before vanished. The in-laws started spitting insults. Ingrate. I never thought she'd be so cold. And my sister's husband just stood there flustered and panicked. And my sister stared at me with eyes full of utter despair and blazing hatred. After watching them mutter and leave the house, I turned back to the workers and officially terminated their contract. The foreman, seeing the situation, was mortified. I handed over enough cash on the spot to cover the day's wages and inconvenience, promised to transfer the formal penalty to their company later, and had them leave politely. I wanted those strangers out of my sanctuary as soon as possible. Once I was alone, the house returned to a grave, quiet stillness, but it was no longer the sanctuary I knew. The torn-out walls, scattered rubble, and the lingering, unpleasant atmosphere left by the intruders made that clear. That same day, I called a locksmith. I was going to replace every lock in the house with the latest digital locks that can't be picked or duplicated. Next, I contacted the nation's largest security company. I contracted, without hesitation, every physical defense I could think of. AI-equipped surveillance cameras covering the entire perimeter, high-performance intrusion sensors on every window and door, and a 24/7 monitored alarm system that links directly to the police. I also hired a different, trustworthy contractor to repair the destroyed plumbing. The unexpected heavy expense stung, but if it meant protecting my castle and my peace of mind, it felt like an investment well worth making. That night, I sat on the rubble-strewn living room floor, hugging my knees. Since childhood, my sister had always wanted what I had. My cherished doll, my favorite dress, my first true friend. And my parents always said the same things. You're the older sister. Lend it to her. You're the older sister. Just put up with it. Each time, I swallowed the discomfort and powerlessness of someone trampling across my territory and kept quiet. I realized now that this incident was an extension of that pattern. My parents, who had both died a few years apart, had always sided with my sister while alive. My father was weak for her tears. My mother's default line was, if you give in, everything will be smoothed over. With them gone, the distorted balance that had held our sisterly dynamic in place had disappeared, and my sister's demands had ballooned without limit. And I no longer had any reason or need to swallow injustice. There was no one left to consult, no parents to rely on. That's why I had to defend this house with my own strength. But I was no child anymore. I could tell what was negotiable and what I must never yield. This house was one of those non-negotiables. A few days later, exactly as I'd expected, they launched a second wave. Not a physical attack this time, but a more insidious campaign aimed at undermining my social standing. First came calls from distant relatives. Kristen, I heard, your sister's family are in trouble, aren't they? They can't pay rent and are homeless. Your house is empty, isn't it? Why don't you help them out for a little while? After all, your blood. It was clear they had concocted a story convenient to them and were spreading it through the family. I was the cruel, heartless sister. They were the fragile victims. Then anonymous silent calls began to come day and night. On social media, jeering posts appeared almost daily from my sister's accounts. Snide remarks meant to sting me. Each time I saw one, I stripped away any emotion, took a screenshot, recorded the date, time, and URL, and methodically saved them in a folder labeled Evidence. And I turned off all notifications from their accounts. I refused to let their words intrude into my life and contaminate my thoughts. That didn't mean I cut off communication entirely. I anticipated they might someday send a message that would decisively implicate them, and I wanted to be ready. Meanwhile, their calls and messages continued like a storm, but I refused to answer a single one. I had no interest whatsoever in listening to their arguments anymore. Any possibility of dialogue had ended the moment they destroyed my home. After I finished building the physical defenses and weathered their psychological attacks, an eerie calm settled over my house. Weeks passed in a quiet so unnerving it felt like the stillness before a storm. I didn't believe they had given up. They were simply waiting for me to show weakness. I kept my guard up and prepared for another overseas trip. On the morning I left, I checked the security system repeatedly to make sure it was operating perfectly. The footage streamed crisply to my phone's app. The cameras covered every angle of the house with no blind spots. Motion sensors were set to maximum sensitivity. Carrying a thin edge of unease, I left the country again for work. And the day fate had been waiting for came, 1 week after my trip began in the dead of night. It happened just after I'd finished the final check on materials for an important presentation the next day in my hotel room in one of Europe's major cities, and had finally laid down in bed. My phone began to vibrate violently, accompanied by a shrill alarm tone. It was an emergency alert from the highest level security app I had installed. Warning, unauthorized access detected at garage door. Warning, backyard motion sensor triggered. A cold shock gripped my chest like ice water. I leapt out of bed, fumbling with trembling hands to switch the app to the live camera feed. On the screen, in eerie infrared monochrome, a nightmare unfolded. As I expected, it was my sister and her husband. With shaking fingers, I hit the record button. Dressed in dark clothes like a pair of professional burglars, they prowled my backyard with a flashlight. My sister was wrestling with a crowbar against a window, while her husband yanked violently at the garage door. The high-grade camera microphone picked up their whispered conversation with chilling clarity. "She changed the locks, that conniving bitch. This window won't open either. She's put in new heavy-duty locks. Damn it, then we'll just have to smash the glass. Do it quietly." This was no longer a family dispute. With the crowbar as a weapon, this was a premeditated, malicious crime. When they aimed for the large living room window and my sister raised the crowbar, I slammed my finger down on another button in the app, the deep red icon that armed the alarm system. The next instant, an earth-shattering siren screamed from my house. All the floodlights blazed on at once, and the pitch-black neighborhood lit up like noon. On the live feed, the intruders froze in panic, then scattered like startled spiders. And all of it was captured as undeniable evidence on my phone. Taking one deep breath, I calmly dialed the local police station that covered my neighborhood. Despite it being an international call, I explained the situation, sent the recorded footage to the address they gave me, and was astonished at how quickly they acted. A few hours later, as dawn broke over London, the message arrived. "There are 5 police cars in front of the house. What on earth happened?" It was my sister, frantic. I replied coolly, every word chosen with care. "Oh, you didn't know? Last night, burglars tried to break into my house. I simply reported it to the police. Terrifying times we live in. You'd better be careful with your own locks, too." Of course, I knew perfectly well she was one of those burglars. Her message was nothing more than a desperate attempt to deny the cold reality of arrest. I changed my plans immediately and booked a flight home. By the time I landed at the local airport, the news had already reached me. My sister and her husband had been arrested on charges of unlawful entry, attempted property damage, and residential trespass. The call came from Mr. Peterson, the skilled corporate lawyer I had retained before leaving. He had taken my case out of personal interest. Jet-lagged though I was, I went straight from the airport to Mr. Peterson's office. His firm was in a prime location downtown, the atmosphere quiet and weighty. He projected my footage on a large screen and analyzed it with cool precision. "This is perfect evidence. The level of planning here and the fact that they had a crowbar make this far more than a family quarrel. This is an aggravated attempted burglary by joint perpetrators. As a criminal matter, they are in a very weak position." Then he turned his sharp gaze on me. "Kristen, what is your goal here? Do you want them sent to prison, or do you want them out of your life forever?" "The latter." My answer was immediate. "My only wish is complete peace. I have no interest in whether or not they're punished by the law." On that basis, Mr. Peterson and I crafted a meticulous settlement strategy. Sure enough, within days, the opposing lawyer approached us with a settlement proposal. If they received criminal records, both my sister's husband and her father-in-law would lose their jobs. Their lives would effectively be over. When they realized neither tears nor threats would work, negotiation was the only option left. Mr. Peterson told me, almost with disbelief, of the outrageous claims they made during the process. That it was an unavoidable act because you failed in your duty as the elder sister to support them. That you should compensate them for several $1,000s in so-called renovation expenses. Each report left me past anger, shaken instead by the sheer shamelessness of human self-justification. Mr. Peterson dismantled each claim with surgical calm, leveraging the video evidence as our unassailable trump card. Any further unreasonable demands will collapse these negotiations. That means a full court battle. And if it comes to that, we will release this footage. Which side do you think society will condemn then? After weeks of back and forth, they finally withdrew all demands and agreed to our terms in full. Through my lawyer, I laid out just one condition for settlement. It was not financial. From this day forward, they are prohibited from any form of contact with me personally, my home, my workplace, or my property. Nor may they attempt contact with my friends or colleagues, whether by physical means, phone, email, social media, or any other conceivable method. This condition would be written into a legally binding pledge, equivalent in power to a restraining order. And if they violated it even once, they would be liable for a massive penalty. They had no choice but to accept. On the day of the signing, I sat with Mr. Peterson in the stately conference room of his law office. Word came from the adjoining room that all 4 of them, including my sister's in-laws, had finished signing. A few minutes later, through the glass-paneled hallway, I saw the 4 of them walking with their heads bowed. My sister glanced back once. In her eyes, I thought I saw a blaze of hatred mixed with the faintest trace of tears. But my heart was as still as the bottom of a lake, unmoving. The bond of sisters who had once grown up under the same roof was gone, erased completely. Mr. Peterson placed the thick stack of signed pledges in front of me. Congratulations, Kristen. Your freedom is now legally secured. From there, I went straight to the police station and formally withdrew my complaint. The officer asked, "Are you sure about this?" But my resolve did not waver. 6 months have passed since that day. My life is utterly peaceful now. No more anonymous calls, no surprise visits, no spiteful harassment on social media. I never knew how restful life could be when you no longer have to brace yourself against someone's malice. The house that had been damaged has been restored more beautifully and functionally than before. The ruined kitchen became the spacious island kitchen I had always dreamed of. On weekends, I invite friends, cook for them in the new space, and host small, joyful gatherings. At work, perhaps strengthened by the confidence of surviving that ordeal, I've secured even larger contracts. In both career and private life, my world has regained its shine. I lost my family. Or perhaps it was only ever an illusion to begin with. In exchange, I regained my dignity and the reins of my own life. I learned firsthand that blood ties can sometimes become the heaviest chains of all. Was what I did cruel?